Captain Cole Drayden stood at the edge of the outpost, staring out over the rocky expanse of Verdun. 5. The wind howled across the barren landscape, sweeping dust over the dry, cracked ground. The planet had been harsh to him ever since he arrived here years ago, but it had become his home. There was no choice. This was where he had been sent, and he would stay here, maintaining the station and ensuring its survival. The outpost wasn't much. A few small buildings for shelter, a communications tower, and a storage area. The weather had stripped the place of any charm, but it was functional. It didn't matter. Cole wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to survive. As he walked toward the comms tower, a flash of light caught his eye. It was too bright to be a normal star, and it was moving too fast. He blinked against the brightness, his heart quickening. The object fell quickly, and before Cole could react, a massive explosion shook the ground beneath his feet. The force of it sent him stumbling, his hand gripping the station's wall for balance. A moment later, another roar shook the sky as the ground vibrated again. This time, with a low, rumbling growl. "What the hell was that?" Cole muttered to himself. Without wasting time, he ran toward the source of the crash. The emergency alert was already flashing on his communication device, but he ignored it. This was something bigger. He had to see it for himself. As he reached the edge of the crater, the smoke cleared, revealing a wrecked ship. It was massive, unlike anything Cole had ever seen. Its sleek alien design gleamed under the planet's twin suns. The ship's dark surface shimmered with an otherworldly energy, and strange markings covered its sides, glowing faintly in the fading light. For a moment, Cole stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Then he moved forward, drawing his weapon just in case. He didn't know what kind of alien he might be dealing with, but he wasn't about to take any chances. Slowly, he approached the wreckage, his boots crunching the rocks beneath him. He peered inside the twisted metal of the ship's hull and saw movement. Something was still alive. A hiss sounded from the wreckage as a figure emerged, pushing itself out from the ship's twisted interior. The creature stood tall, its figure sleek and armored in shimmering silver. It had the posture of royalty, a commanding presence that was hard to ignore. But the creature's face was hidden behind a helmet, its features obscured. The only thing visible were glowing eyes that stared out at him with an intensity that made him take a step back. "Are you alive?" Cole called, his voice echoing across the rocky wasteland. He raised his hands slightly to show he wasn't a threat. The creature stepped forward, its movements graceful, despite the crash. It looked at him for a moment, as though assessing him. Before it spoke, its voice deep and strong. "This is not where I belong," it said, its words clear, though they carried a strange accent. "Tell me where I am." Cole took a moment to collect his thoughts. "You're on Verdun." 5, he replied. "A human outpost." "This is a remote planet. We're far from the rest of civilization here." The alien looked confused, its head tilted slightly, as if trying to understand. "Human outpost?" It repeated the words as if they were foreign to it. Then it straightened, its voice steady. "I am Queen Zarella of the Zorathian Empire. I should not be here. I must return to my people." Cole's eyes widened at the mention of a queen. He had no idea what the Zorathian Empire was, but the way she carried herself suggested that she was not someone to be taken lightly. "Queen Zarella," he said slowly, trying to process the situation. "You've crash-landed here."
"I'm sure we can get you help, but we're not exactly equipped to handle a queen." Zarella stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she looked around the barren outpost.
Her gaze traveled over the sparse buildings, the cracked ground, and the rusted equipment that made up the station. There was a coldness in her eyes, a flicker of disdain. "This is your home?" she asked, her tone filled with disbelief. Cole blinked, taken aback by the question. "Yeah," he said, trying not to sound defensive. It's not much, but it's home. The Queen's eyes scanned the horizon, then returned to him. This? She said again, her voice tinged with a mix of confusion and incredulity. This is what you call home? Look, this is a rough place, but it's mine. And we make do. We survive. The Queen was silent for a moment, as if processing what he had said. She took a deep breath, then spoke again, her voice softer but still firm. I must find my people, she said.
I am not meant to be here. Cole looked at the wreckage of her ship. The damage was extensive. He didn't know if anyone was coming for her.
The crash had knocked out any communication, and no ships had been detected entering the system. I'll help you, he said, his voice steady. But we'll need to figure out a plan. There's no way to contact anyone right now. Zarella regarded him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without warning, she nodded. Very well. I will accept your help, but know this, I will not stay here forever. Cole sighed and glanced back at the outpost. The harsh winds whipped through the air, but something told him this wasn't the end of a simple crash. It was only the beginning. Cole Drayden knew the situation wasn't ideal, but there was no turning back now. He led Queen Zarella through the cold, dusty corridors of the outpost. The Queen walked with a proud yet cautious stride, her silvery armor gleaming faintly in the weak light. As they entered the main building, Zarella's eyes scanned everything, taking in every detail. She seemed unimpressed by the simple surroundings, her gaze always moving, never resting. So, where do I sleep? Zarella asked, her voice low but sharp, as she glanced at the small cot against the wall in the next room. Cole chuckled lightly, trying to keep things light. That's about the best we have for now. I can get you something more comfortable once we figure out what's going on. Zarella didn't respond right away, her attention on the room, as if she were comparing it to the grand chamber she was likely used to. Cole had no doubt she was used to luxury and comfort. Here, everything was practical but stark, just enough to keep things running. This was a world of survival, not of grandeur. What kind of people live here? Zarella asked as she lowered herself onto the cot, her body stiff from the crash. How do you survive in a place like this? Cole leaned against the doorframe, looking at her with a thoughtful expression. He knew that people from the outer reaches of space didn't think much of humans. They considered them primitive, unworthy of serious attention. The idea of a human surviving alone on a desolate world like Verdun 5 was probably laughable to someone like Zarella. We make do, Cole answered simply. We don't have the resources like some of the other planets, but we make what we need. You learn to live off the land, use what you have, and keep going. It's not easy, but we manage. Zarella's eyes narrowed, clearly processing his words. She leaned back, placing her hands behind her head, still looking like she had more questions than answers. Her confidence in her own superiority was clear, but the crash and the damage to her ship had humbled her, even if only slightly. They don't understand how hard it is to live like this, Cole continued, watching her carefully. But that's the thing. You'd be surprised how much strength people have when they have no other choice but to keep going. Zarella didn't reply. Instead, she looked out the window, as if searching for something beyond the horizon. The wind outside picked up, the sound of it howling against the station walls. It reminded Cole of the loneliness that came with being stationed here. He wasn't just alone physically. The isolation seeped into his bones. The silence stretched on for a few moments before Zarella spoke again.
This is not where I belong, she said, her voice quieter now. I should be back with my people, ruling beside my court.
My empire is vast, and yet here I am, stranded in the most primitive place I've ever seen. How did I end up in a place like this? Cole walked over to the table and started pulling up a few charts on the old, cracked screen. The station's communication system was outdated, and the only maps it had were basic, showing nothing beyond the immediate planet and its moons. He needed to start figuring out a plan, but the reality of their situation was sinking in. Zarella wasn't going to just wait around until someone came to rescue her. She wasn't the type.
"You won't be stuck here forever," Cole said, trying to reassure her. "We'll figure something out."
I'll send out a distress signal, see if we can get a response. Zarella sat up on the cot, looking at him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Do you really believe anyone would come for me? Or for you? She paused, her eyes searching his face. I can't rely on anyone. No one cares about me out here. My empire is far away, and you are alone. Cole looked back at her, meeting her gaze. He'd spent years here, alone except for occasional communication with Earth. The idea of being rescued was nothing but a distant hope, but he wasn't giving up. Not now. Not when someone like Zarella, an alien queen, was depending on him, even if she didn't quite understand that yet. We make our own way, Cole said, his voice steady. We don't wait for someone to come to save us. We find a way to save ourselves. Zarella's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first sign of any emotion beyond her usual cold demeanor. I see. So you believe in yourself and your people. Cole nodded. You'll see. Humans might not have the grand empire you do, but we're resourceful. We'll figure something out. Zarella stood up, her movement still elegant despite the stiffness from the crash. I hope, for your sake, that you are right. I am not accustomed to being stuck in such places. She walked over to the table where Cole had been working, her fingers brushing against the old equipment. I would prefer to take my ship and leave, but if that is impossible, we must work together. Cole watched as she examined the equipment, her curiosity now matched by a quiet determination. The Queen's confidence hadn't vanished entirely. She might be stranded, but she was still a force to be reckoned with. And despite her pride, she was starting to understand that surviving on Verdun, 5 meant relying on each other. Tomorrow, Cole said, we'll begin figuring out how to get you back to your people. But for tonight, we rest. Zarella nodded, but as she lay back down, her eyes didn't close. She stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. The weight of her empire was still on her shoulders, but for now, she would have to put her trust in a human, someone she had once thought beneath her. And Cole, in turn, had come to realize that, for all their differences, they were both stranded in the same place now, and maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to survive together. The days following the crash passed in a blur of tense silence and hard work. Cole and Zarella fell into a rhythm, each of them focused on the task at hand. The Queen, though still clearly uncomfortable in the primitive surroundings, began to show signs of adapting to the situation. She was no longer the distant, aloof figure who had first arrived at the outpost. There was a growing understanding between the two of them, a silent acknowledgement that survival depended on their cooperation. Cole spent hours trying to repair the communication system, using every trick he had learned in his years of isolation. He was used to fixing things with limited resources, but even he knew that getting a distress signal out to the rest of the galaxy was a long shot. Zarella, though frustrated at the delay, didn't press him. Instead, she observed quietly from the sidelines, offering her knowledge when it was needed, but remaining largely silent about her own plans. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the outpost, Zarella approached Cole with a rare expression of curiosity. She had been sitting on the small veranda, outside, her gaze fixed on the stars. For the first time since her arrival, she seemed lost in thought. You humans, Zarella said quietly, her voice almost contemplative. You are far more resilient than I first imagined.
Cole looked up from the equipment he was working on.
He had expected her to remain distant, a queen who saw herself as above him in every way. But her tone was different now.
We make do with what we have, he replied, wiping his hands on his pants. Survival's a skill, you know.
But what I don't understand is why you stay here. This place? It is so far from the Empire, so far from the power, the luxury, the wealth. Why not go to the stars, to something better? Cole leaned against the table, thinking carefully before he answered.
You might think it's just about power and wealth. But for me, it's about something different. It's about knowing what you're fighting for. I'm here because I made a choice. I'm here because this is my responsibility.
Zarella's eyes narrowed. Responsibility? She repeated the word with a certain distaste.
Your people seem so small.
So insignificant compared to what I'm used to. I have an empire that spans the stars, and yet here I am, stranded in the dirt.
Do you understand what that's like?
Cole paused. He had been living on the fringes of the galaxy for years, far from the grand cities and powerful governments that Zarella spoke of. His life had been a lonely one, but it had been his. The choice to stay here on this barren planet wasn't one he had ever questioned.
I don't have an empire,
Cole said slowly, his voice calm but firm.
I don't have millions of subjects or vast fleets, but I have something important here. People rely on me.
And maybe that's worth more than all the power in the galaxy. Zarella regarded him silently for a moment. It was clear that she didn't fully understand his point of view. To her, the idea of living without vast power and influence was a foreign concept. But there was something in his words that seemed to resonate with her.
Your people must be strange, Zarella muttered, more to herself than to Cole. You value things that we would never think twice about.
You live in this wasteland, and you call it home. Cole smiled slightly, a hint of pride in his expression. It's not much, but it's ours. That's what matters. You might not get it now, but maybe you will. You're not as far from home as you think. The alien queen seemed to contemplate this for a while. She didn't speak again, but her gaze shifted from him to the stars above. It was as if she was considering something far deeper than just their current predicament. Over the next few days, Zarella became more involved in the station's upkeep. She helped with small repairs and shared her knowledge of technology, though her expertise was far more advanced than anything Cole had ever worked with. He could see that she was frustrated at being stuck in such a backward place, but there was also a quiet determination in her movements. She wasn't a queen of leisure. She was a queen of action, of control. And as much as she resented being stranded, she began to see that working together was their best chance of survival. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, Zarella finally spoke again. Her voice was softer, as though she had put aside some of her initial pride. Tell me more about this responsibility you keep talking about, she said, her eyes flickering toward him.
What does it mean to be responsible for others? Cole set down the tool he had been using and looked at her. He hadn't expected her to ask that question, but it was a fair one.
It means protecting them, he said simply. It means doing what you can to make sure they're safe, even if it's hard. Even if it means you're the one who has to give everything up. I'm here because these people need me.
That's what responsibility is. Zarella's gaze softened slightly.
For the first time since their conversation had started, she seemed to understand. Her empire might have been vast, but it wasn't built on the foundation of loyalty or duty. It was built on control, on dominance. The idea of caring for others out of a sense of responsibility was something that she hadn't fully grasped until now. I see, she said slowly. Perhaps there is more to your people than I thought. Cole didn't respond immediately. He had been expecting her to brush off his words, to challenge him or mock him, as she had done before. But she didn't. Instead, she seemed thoughtful, almost introspective. It was a small victory, but to Cole, it felt like progress. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the two of them stood there, looking out at the stars. For a moment, they weren't the queen of a distant empire and a lone human soldier. They were two individuals stuck on a desolate planet, trying to figure out how to survive. And for the first time, Cole felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to make it out of here. Together. The days on Verdun. 5 seemed to drag on, and with each passing moment, the tension between Cole and Zarella grew less pronounced. The Queen had slowly started to adapt to life in the outpost, even if she didn't fully accept it. Her pride still lingered, but there was no denying the bond that had formed between them. They weren't allies in the traditional sense, but for now, they needed each other to survive. Cole had been working non-stop, trying to find a way to send a distress signal, but the systems were ancient and the equipment barely functioned. Zarela, despite her superior knowledge of technology, had been limited by the primitive tools available at the station, but she was determined, and in the end, her experience helped Cole more than he had expected. One evening, after another long day of repairs, Cole sat down at the small table in the main room of the station. He was exhausted, but there was still so much to be done. The communication systems weren't responding, and every time he tried a new approach, the result was the same. Nothing. His hope was fading, but he couldn't give up. Not yet. Zarella entered the room, her posture as regal as ever. The shine of her armor was dimmed by the dust of the station, but she still looked every bit the queen. She had been silent for the past few hours, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. But now, her gaze softened as she approached Cole.
"You've been at this for days," she said, her voice unusually gentle. "You're pushing yourself too hard." Cole glanced up at her, surprised by the concern in her words.
He wasn't used to her showing any kind of vulnerability.
"I'm not done yet,"
he replied, his voice steady. "There's still work to be done." She stood quietly for a moment, watching him. Then, with a sigh, she spoke again. "I know what it's like to be desperate, to feel as if you have no control over your fate." She paused, and her eyes seemed to reflect a mix of regret and something else, perhaps understanding.
"You may not be able to fix this. Maybe we need to accept that." Cole didn't respond immediately.
Her words stung, but there was truth in them. He had been working tirelessly for so long, trying to get a signal out, but every attempt ended in failure. Perhaps Zarella was right. Perhaps this was their fate, stranded on this barren world, with no one coming to help. But something in him refused to accept that. "I'm not giving up," Cole said finally, his voice quiet but determined. "There's always a way. You just have to find it." Zarella studied him for a moment, her eyes scanning his face as if searching for something. Finally, she spoke again, her tone softer than usual. Perhaps your way is different from mine. I have always been accustomed to making others bend to my will, to commanding fleets and armies. But out here, on this forsaken rock, I realize that maybe survival isn't about power. It's about resilience." Her words hit Cole harder than he expected. The queen, who had once seemed so distant and unapproachable, was now speaking to him as an equal. He could see the shift in her, the way she was beginning to see things from a new perspective. It wasn't about her empire, her throne, or her soldiers. It was about surviving together, in whatever way they could.
"You're right," Cole said, his voice low.
"It's not about power. It's about what you're willing to do for the people who need you." Zarella nodded, her expression serious.
"Maybe I have been wrong to think that power is the answer to everything. You have taught me that." She paused, looking away, and in some strange way I find it. comforting. The words were unexpected, but they were sincere. Cole couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had always believed that humanity's strength lay not in weapons or technology, but in their ability to endure, to find strength even in the darkest of times. And now it seemed that Zarla, the alien queen, was beginning to understand that too. For the first time, she looked at the outpost with a different kind of respect. It wasn't just a place of survival. It was a testament to the strength of the people who lived there. They had no fleets, no armies, no empire. They had each other, and that was enough. The next morning, Cole woke up to a strange feeling. He had dreamed of rescue ships, of distant stars, of voices calling out from the vastness of space. But when he opened his eyes, he was still here, on Verdun. 5, with Zarella by his side. It wasn't a dream. It was reality. And for the first time in a long while, Cole didn't feel the crushing weight of isolation. He felt something else. Hope. He stood up and walked to the communications room. Zarella joined him soon after, her footsteps, soft but steady. Together, they worked silently, making small adjustments to the equipment. The Queen had learned quickly, and her knowledge, combined with Cole's persistence, was beginning to show results. The systems still weren't perfect, but they were getting closer. Every attempt was a step forward. Later that day, as the sun began to set, they managed to get a faint signal. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A few short bursts of static, followed by a crackling voice. "This is Captain Jessica Vega, of the Salvation. We received your distress signal. Hold tight.
Help is on the way!" The words hit Cole like a punch to the gut.
Help. It was finally happening. After all the uncertainty, the fear, the endless days of hard work, they had succeeded. The Queen looked at him, her face a mix of disbelief and gratitude. "We did it," she said softly. Cole nodded, his chest tight with emotion. "We did." As they stood there, looking out at the endless sky, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they had a reason to believe that no matter how small or distant a place might seem, hope could still reach it.